For this episode, I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Jeffrey Wotherspoon. Jeffrey's an executive and leadership coach with accreditations from the International Coaching Federation. He's the Director of People Development, Innovation, and a founding member of the Universal Coaching Alliance. He's also an accredited Your Career Plan coach with us here at Career Matters. During our chat today, Jeffrey talks a little bit about how he changed the path that he felt was laid out before him, how he challenged some limiting internal beliefs, and also how he wants to position himself and, importantly, his personal brand as he moves forward. So let's dive in.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosner. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the career equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
Thank you, Zoe. Great to be here and good to be having this chat with you. Thank you for that introduction as well. Most of the work I do is bespoke, as in tailored totally for the client and their needs. In my capacity as a trainer, facilitator, I have probably 3 specialist areas. So one's in the area of personal effectiveness, and it will include things like coaching skills, mentoring skills, influence and negotiation, presentation skills, and that falls under leadership development a lot. You mentioned my conflict resolution certification, and that's really me as a mediator. But when I'm training, I'm working with groups, supporting them with things like how to have difficult/crucial conversations. And my final area is linked to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I specialize in how to really make it work, because sadly, a lot of diversity work isn't working for people. And I create a space for learning, so there's understanding and empathy amongst everyone in the room. Leveraging the diversity in the room helps people understand and work together better, and they can create working environments that work best for them.
There are voices that people don't want to hear in terms of their viewpoints and things that you do want to hear. Given what we're going through in the world at the moment, to set some of those assumptions aside and get underneath that layer must be incredibly challenging but rewarding.
Yeah. So all voices need to feel heard, because everyone's a human being, right? When you let people speak up, you begin to discover is they're not as polarized as they thought they were. So what I found is if dialogue can happen in a space and it's well managed, people tend to align and meet in the middle somewhere. And I've done it for loads of organizations, and they've generally found great value from it because people are more aligned than the media would show you. But of course, the media's job is to bring extreme stories. Imagine watching the news and something extreme wasn't happening. That wouldn't be the news that we know. And that's not necessarily reflective of society or the workplace at large. They find the minority of stories and blow them up and put them in our face all the time. I actually became a coach primarily to work with young men in prisons. And my plan initially was to be a coach, like gain the coaching qualification and skills, because I found them to be super valuable. That process of coaching in that self-directed way gives the young men a space to reflect in a way that they've never had before. No one that I've coached has ever experienced something like that before. And then they can really hear themselves telling themselves to do something the right way, as opposed to perhaps the easy way/the wrong way. So I actually started doing some career coaching with young women through a charity called the Young Women's Trust. And I really don't know how many women I worked with, but it's in the hundreds. I would say over 300 young women, working specifically with them, looking at their careers. And it was actually the Your Career Plan that I was using as my main template and focus for supporting these young women into their careers. And that work was amazing.
Thank you. I can understand how it's really hard almost to let go of some of that sometimes. What I'm really excited to do today is to dive into and explore a little bit your story so far in terms of some key moments in your story using the lens of the career equation, which we'll talk about a bit more in a moment. And are you happy to do that?
Well, certainly. Yes, let's go for it.
Jolly good. I think it would be only fair that I share with the listeners and the viewers that we're connected through that coaching space. We both have a passion, don't we, for really helping people to really hone in on what that sweet spot is and really to find that from within themselves, to know who am I when I'm at my best? What is it that I need in my world to thrive? And how do I go about getting that? And I guess an element of what you do through the career equation
From the client's perspective, the career equation is really a game changer. Unlike traditional coaching, where you can really reflect and see what comes out and be surprised by what comes out, in the career space, the career equation and everything that comes with the career plan is super useful because you can actually get all the benefits of coaching in terms of the reflection and the learning about people personally as well as their situation. For many of the young women, as I say, they're underrepresented, many of them lacking confidence, many of them really not sure what to do at all with their career or not feeling any form of empowerment. The career equation does all of that because it helps them to identify their skills, helps them to identify their passion, helps them to think about the impact they want to have, and then the environment where they're at their best. And just that in and of itself is huge for them, particularly around the skills. And of course, the coaching element comes to facilitate that, but people are surprised by how many skills they get. And then of course, the great thing about the career equation is it helps them to find their sweet spot. So how all the skills, passion, impact, and environment comes together, and then we make it a statement. And you just see the enthusiasm, the energy, the excitement in it. And it's just like the revelation that, wow, yes, I've got this. And the powerful thing about the career equation is it's not centered on a job or even a role description. So whereas some people may feel as though I need to know what field or industry or career or title I want, the career equation blows that out the water because it's in some ways generic, although it's specific to them. And then they can begin to think, actually, I can do anything. What it can be, it's my guiding star as to where I'll thrive. And once they look at their equation, they see that actually there's many different industries, many different things available to them. So the broadness of that is great, but then the specificity of knowing what to look out for and how you could contribute meaningfully to that role works for them as well.
Brilliant. And what's so nice is you've just explained the equation for me. So, and I was going to say, for those that maybe haven't come across it before, what is it? But you beautifully just explained that, yeah, it is about finding that thriving zone, that sweet spot. How do I play to my best strengths, my skills? Would you be happy to share what your current design statement says about you?
Yeah, most definitely. I, Jeffrey, will use my skills in connecting with people and my passion for developing potential to help those I work with become the best versions of themselves. A safe, fun, and collaborative environment works best for me.
Brilliant. And how that tells you so much more, doesn't it? It tells us so much more than, hi, I'm Jeffrey, a coach or a facilitator, or all those lovely things that are in your bio, but it really gives us an essence of why you do the work you do. So thank you for sharing that. What curious to know then, what's next for Jeffrey? Is there something you can share with us around that?
Traditionally, when I first entered even coaching, I was really coaching individual contributors in an organization. And I thought, what would it be like if I was working with managers? Then I started working with managers. And I thought, what would it be like if I was working with senior managers? What would it be like if I was in a boardroom? So I see this as a career challenge for me. And this is primarily because of the level of seniority and influence and impact in the organization. So that's what growth looks like to me and what I'm actively thinking about. So that's really thinking about my brand and how I position myself in a way where I am attractive as well as visible to some of these companies and organizations.
Yeah. So that what I'm kind of hearing there is about Jeffrey's identity as a brand, as a business, in terms of working in your own space and your own expertise, of which you've got so much to offer. What would be nice is refreshing your design statement at another level. So it speaks about the brand and the business and what you want. Does that sound a good way of continuing to use the equation to explore?
That would be a great way to continue the conversation. And that's actually something I've been seeking to do. So I'd be interested to see what comes out.
Brilliant. So what we'll do, we'll use the equation, so the lens of skills, passion, impact, environment. But what I'd like to do is just drop into 4 moments in your story so far that link to one of those. So when you think about skills, your strengths, those sort of qualities, could you maybe describe a moment in your early life to younger Jeffrey when you discovered that you had a real strength or talent for something?
Yeah. So I guess this question for me is a little bit challenging to answer, primarily because in my earlier life, the skills I believed I had or thought I had were really just around football. And like most youngsters, I wanted to pursue being a footballer. I know everyone says they were good at football. I was actually good at football. However, that dream came to an abrupt end quite early on. And essentially it's because my mum didn't believe in my skills as a footballer and didn't support it. And there was no way at that age I could pursue anything in football. without the backing of a parent. So what that meant is I found another focus in life, and that focus wasn't necessarily a positive one. So I began to head down the wrong road. I began to get myself in trouble. But in terms of like being employed by someone, I didn't see that for me. And when I say employed, employed in a way that I would find meaningful. And what I mean by that is my mum, my friend's parents worked at the supermarket, the post office. So I did think that was a possibility for me, but it wasn't attractive to me or my peers. And other forms of employment, I know for me, for some reason, I felt were inaccessible. So I wasn't necessarily able to identify any skills in that time. But as I say, when I had some events happen which was able to shift my perspective, I began to see some skills which took me a very long time to identify because they were essentially people skills. And I thought it came so naturally to me. I didn't know that they were skills of any value because I thought, what can people skills do to help you? And now I know they can do a lot. But essentially, I began working with troubled young people, and that was the first time I began to see myself have a positive impact. And then I began to see that I can connect with them and I can help them make better decisions. And that's when I began to first learn about the skills I had. And that's what ultimately led me into the route to youth work as a start of my career.
And I mean, wow, I'm sure you were very talented at football if you were scouted and player of the year. But often those early sort of stages, you do feel like you're learning, aren't you?
So if you want to find the purpose for why a chair was made, you have to ask the one who made it. So if you want to find your purpose, you have to ask your creator. And I thought that's exactly what I need to do because I felt very purposeless. So when I began to discover it, then things changed. It was no longer, the limiting beliefs could no longer work in the same way because I thought I have a purpose and I'm actually made for this. So that's what helped me. So now when it comes, faith is still an important part of my life.
I think what I really hear is you talked earlier about feeling like you were, or believing that you were dealt a set of cards, and that's the cards you dealt with. But then I'm hearing that through your faith and through the changes, and of course, yes, the situation with Mamba football, that happened. But what I'm hearing is through work that you did about finding your purpose, you essentially took some new cards out of the other pack that exists and added them. You've been adding to that deck, if you like, possibility. And earlier, much earlier in our conversation, you talked about what ifs. And you would say to yourself, what if I could coach managers? What if I could coach senior leaders? And it sounds like the possibility there is like, what if I can grab that card and that can be part of my deck as well, rather than just what I have? So it's almost like, whilst they could be limiting beliefs quite easily, couldn't they? It sounds like your confidence is there to question what if I could rather than I can't. And that's really coming through for me really strongly there. So we'll hold that thought at the moment, but be thinking about in terms of where you want to take the business, what are those strong sort of like superpowers, I know you like to call it a little bit. What are your superpowers that mean that they're going to want you in the boardroom or they're going to want you on developing programs in the organizations because you bring something, a voice, your own identity to the table? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Zoe. And if you talk about skills, however you pitch it, there are a finite number of skills, and many people can have those exact same skills. So the difference is how the person utilizes the skills.
Getting to the nitty gritty of a skill is an important part of exploring someone's career equation. What is it about the way they utilize a specific skill? How do they use it? What is it that they do that others don't do? This will help people to understand and not overlook their uniqueness. What sets them apart from others and how to articulate it. So, moving from something like communication skills to well, I take complex information that might seem boring and make it interesting and digestible really helps us to understand the way they use the skills and what they bring to the skill. Try it.
And every time I was in a new space, I was feeling huge imposter syndrome. So it got to the point that I was achieving my goals. I was coaching execs. I was training execs. I was in particular companies and organizations. I was getting contracts, all of the things I wanted. But I was riddled with sort of imposter syndrome and insecurity, right? And the only thing that carried me through and kept on saying, well, two things that carried me through: my faith, because I thought, whatever happens, I'm not walking alone. I genuinely believe that. And then I married an amazing woman. So with my wife, I'm able to be totally vulnerable, and she can know that something happened a couple of years ago where I did a leadership program, and they're just telling me about all of the challenges that they're having in the organization. So I'm confused at why they're telling me this. And I'm saying, so why have you told me? They're like, oh, this leader says she's heard you speak twice. You're quite inspirational. You're quite motivational. So we just want you to come in and do something to inspire and motivate them. And this is the first time I've been asked to do something like that. So I took it on, really stressed out about it, over prepared for it. And I went and I delivered. And when I delivered, I got positive feedback, etc. But something in me just knew that it wasn't me. I ended up having supervision, and I'm speaking to the supervisor and I'm explaining to her the situation. And what I'm wanting is to learn how to essentially present differently. What can I do differently to have a better impact on the crowd? But I guess things aren't necessarily aligning. So she just says to me, sort of, Jeffrey, what's going on here? And then I guess childhood and growing up came back, because I think they see me as a young black guy who shouldn't be in the room. I think when I go up and they see me and I'm speaking in front of all of these people, sometimes hundreds, etc., they're thinking, what's he here for and what can he say? She said, but what if they thought the opposite? What if they thought, look at this amazing young black man? Then when everything comes together, I was like, that's why they call me, and that's why this happens, and that's why. So I realized it was genuinely what I'm bringing to the table. So to test it, I thought, okay, from now on, I'm going to be me. And I would say my career was going in an upward diagonal trajectory, and it just stopped, Zoe, and just went vertical. It just stopped, and then I can't describe what happened. All I can say is when I became myself, things changed. I wasn't called for that many keynotes. I started getting loads and loads of requests for keynotes. My clients began to change, and I started to even price differently and own my space and my value differently, because I was like, actually, I found what makes me unique. And I have all of these skills, I have all of these experience, but now I'm stepping into them and using them in a way that only I can, because only I'm me. So linked back to that, it's like where I'm at now. And that's what then gives me the boldness to say, actually, I want to go to the blue chip. I want to go to the multinational. I still think it will be a bit of a daunting experience, but I know that I'll just go and I'll show up as myself, be myself. And I think that something something positive will happen.
It certainly sounds what you believe you will bring to that dynamic is what they've not had before.
I love this question here from Jeffrey's supervisor during a conversation where he'd been having some doubts and holding on to some deep-seated limiting beliefs. Things like, a young black man shouldn't be in the room, or what's he here for? Yet through simple question from his supervisor that asked, but what if they thought the opposite? What if they thought, look at this amazing black man? This completely enabled him to look at himself through a new lens, embrace who he is and be authentically him. And that's why people want him in the room. So my question to you is, are you holding on to some limiting beliefs that are holding you back? And what are they? And what if the opposite was true? What would you do next?
Tell us a little bit about a moment when you were truly loving what you were doing, feeling like you're really on your A game. You're like, oh my gosh, if only every day wasn't like this.
So thank you. This is a great discovery for me. I feel like I'm always in a space of passion, as in I genuinely love what I do. But something that stands out to me, and it's a unique type of work, is some work I did with the US Air Force last year. So again, I was given the opportunity to work with the US Air Force, and I was visiting a number of bases, I think 8 bases across 3 countries. So there was England, Germany, and Italy. And that work was totally amazing for a number of reasons. Firstly, I'd never been on a base before. I knew very little about bases. So I just learned about the novelty and the uniqueness of actually being on a base and what that was like. It's primarily Americans on a base, so I can be in England. But once you enter a base, everything's in dollars. People were saying, this roadshow, this training's really good, etc. And by the time I got to Italy, one of the sessions I did, the second in command of a base, which is a pretty big deal if you can get him to come to your training, came to the training and presented me with a bottle of wine from the area, which was customized, so it had my name on it. And that was just like amazing, because it was just that acknowledgement of the work I had done and how the impact it had. I also, when I went to one of the bases in Germany, Ramstein, where their head office is, and it was for excellence. And I got loads of gifts as well while I was there. So that for me was like, wow, look at the impacts this roadshow is having. And I guess the passion element for me was there was travel involved. There was meeting new people involved, things that I like. I guess As I say, the only person on the roadshow meant there was a lot of responsibility. As daunting as that one, it was huge growth and sort of challenge for me. And I know what that did to my confidence as well was second to none, because I was like, wow, I've really carried this through. And I did that. And they commissioned another roadshow for this year as well. And I'm in the middle of that now. Actually, it breeded more because it was so useful. And then just the ability to connect with people. So every time I'd go to a base, I'd have a host. So someone who's actually with me. Of course, I'd go the night before, so have dinner, etc. One of the nights, loads of people came to have dinner with me. So it's just all of the passions and the ability to connect with people, plus the growth opportunities, the new opportunities. That just made a wonderful experience.
My husband used to be in the armed forces, so I know about the chatter and stuff that goes on, and they don't suffer fools gladly, generally speaking. So the fact that people would come to a session and go away with that kind of like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting, or I really got something and I've heard something different and I feel differently about that topic. And they then express that to others who come to sessions as follower, and they're looking to book you again for more roadshows this year. So you've got your evidence there of the impact. But what I'm hearing more than just the evidence is that like you have changed because you believe I have a place at this table with these people that I've not experienced before, in these places I've not explored before. And so again, it speaks to that place about your identity, your voice, your deck of cards, if you like, that you're working with, that you're choosing new cards to add to that deck all the time that you want to play with, aligned with your superpower of the I bring Jeffrey. That's what you're getting.
Yeah. I don't remember a time where there'd been so much impact, and I also loved what I was doing. And all of that just really served to encourage me and think, yeah, actually, Jeffrey, you can most certainly compete.
Brilliant. And you can see the impact fairly quickly. I think that's what was probably really nice. When we coach people, sometimes you don't get to hear, do you, straight away? It might be months and months down the line that something really changes as a result of some of the discussions you've had. So really nice that you, in that variety of the work that you're doing, you get some of that sort of instant recognition of the value that you're adding by in the moment decisions to put you in front of an audience where they know you're going to make a difference. So that's fabulous. And that kind of moves us nicely on to impact, actually. And I guess to sort of drop in around the idea of the equation and impact to get you to just reflect on a moment again in your life where you've really felt like the work that you were doing at that time had real meaning and really mattered in a measurable way.
The time that comes to mind, it goes all the way back to the beginning. I said I became a coach to work with young men in prison, and my very first client was a young man who was having a very tough time in the prison at the time because of gang-related issues. He couldn't mix it with anyone because some dynamics had happened where essentially he was just unsafe in the prison. Everyone was against him. So he opted for the mentoring. I managed to meet, and just in that process of getting to know you, he told me a bit about him and said he's got his first child on the way. So this is probably October times, and his child is due January, February of the following year. And he said to me, he's another case pending. So a case which the verdict has, the judgment hasn't come yet. And he said to me, he explained the details of the case to me and said he didn't do it. And he said, if he gets found guilty for the new case, he will likely come out after the birth of his first child. And he was just telling me how hard life had been for him and stuff. So he said, there's no way he can stand for that. He said, if that happens, it's just going to be a problem, and he's going to be a huge problem. Towards the end of the session, he said something which I don't really remember, but I just said to him something like, and why is that important to you? And then he put his head down on the table and it was just silent. So I was a little bit taken aback because we've been talking normally and now his head's on his arms on the table and he's not speaking. And I just said to him after some time, are you okay? Then he lifts up his head and he's crying, and I'm taken back. I'm like, oh, why are you crying? And then his answer to my question is, because I'm a good person. And he just started saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was a good person. I was told I'm not a good person, and all my life I've been doing these things, but now I see I'm actually a good person. And he just burst out crying. I had to give him a hug and stuff. And that was just like, whoa, super impactful. So I was like super, super excited. So again, we leave, then I come back for session 3. And I've come back really excited for session 3, particularly because of how session 2 ended. And we're talking, I'm like, how are you and stuff? And he's talking to me, but he just seems different. His energy, his disposition is different. So I said to him, are you okay? He's like, yeah. But he's just not the same person. So he's like, I need to tell you something. I'm like, oh yeah, what is it? And then he starts crying again. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And then he says, oh, I lied to you. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not a big deal, but what could you have lied to me about? We already met twice. Then he says, the case that I told you about that's pending and I said I didn't do it. He says, I did do it. And he's just like saying, oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying, it wasn't a big deal to me at all. So I just like, look, it's fine. And he said, what he said to me is, I'm a good person, so I shouldn't lie. And he said, in between our last session and this session, he called the solicitor and said he's changing his plea from not guilty to guilty. And he said even his solicitor said to him, he's stupid for doing so because the victim of the crime had actually passed away. Nothing to do with him, but the victim for the crime could not actually give evidence. So the solicitor said, you're going to beat the case because there's no one to give evidence. It's just the victim's family. He said to the solicitor, I'm a good person. I did the crime, so I have to take responsibility for it. So we ended that session and I went back to see him for the 4th time and he'd been moved. So I never ever saw him again. And he was the very, very first person that I coached in prison. And after that, I knew my theory of bring coaching to prison was the right one because, it's just a theory. I hadn't tested it. He was the first person to test it on. And I said, yep, I knew this was the way to go. So for me, that's one of the most impactful things of my career.
And I think that's just the first one of many that you continue to do beyond that, where I'm sure you had similar sorts of, not necessarily outcomes, but impacts in terms of adding value. And there's a real sense of them being able to change their narrative. And it leads to what you were talking about earlier as well, about breaking free from expected identity and creating different pathways and actions. So I kind of keep getting this visualization of a deck of cards for some reason in my head. It's like changing. I'm not prepared to keep the deck I've had. I want a new deck. I want a redeal. And what you're doing with them is helping them to uncover the truth that sits behind. Who is it you want to be? What are the shackles that you want to get rid of? The things, the messaging, the narratives you've been told that you've got to have. I'm hearing from you that superpower bit is about the Jeffrey shaking things up so they can discover who is it they really want to be, whether that's as an individual or as a team, as a group, as a board, as a business. So let's move into environment then, because you and I both know that with all the best will in the world, when, you're working in your area of skill, you're playing in your area of passion, you're making a difference, if you don't get the environment bit right, as in how you're doing your work, as in what's sort of supporting you and nurturing you, we both know that you won't thrive. So I want to switch the angle a bit around environment and ask you to think about a time or a moment when you felt like the working environment you were in was actively working against you.
Yeah, I guess in the context of my story, I believe I'm someone who really landed on my feet with regards to my career and the paths that I've gone, because it's really been one positive step after another. And so therefore, in kind of what's led me up to what I'm doing now, I wouldn't say I've had any negative environments or environments that haven't enabled me to thrive. In fact, the environments have been the opposite. I've had lots of positive environments. However, when I was in my teens and really trying to gain some form of employment, I remember my first ever job was as a Christmas temp in Next. And I cannot describe it to you, but that is an environment which just crushes my soul. And it's not about Next, because I had a few other opportunities in retail, but it's an environment, and it's the only environment where I've genuinely felt useless in life. I think my first shift in Next, was like a 6-hour shift, and time has never moved so slow for me. And I remember that I just struggled to actually function there. So they kept on moving me places. And the place where I did the best was the stockroom, which was away from all the madness. But I was in the stockroom for 4 of those 6 hours. And the shop floor, I just couldn't cope. And it's hard for me to describe what it is. But one thing I know is whatever they asked me to do, like if they asked me to put clothes somewhere, I would literally put the clothes there, and then the customer would come and take them and put them somewhere else. And then my job was to put it back. And my mind couldn't function with that because it just felt totally and utterly meaningless. And I know that meaning is so important and crucial to me. I consider myself a disciplined person, but it becomes difficult. And this was reinforced because I had other similar jobs.
Even as you're describing that, your energy is suddenly like restricted. Feel like you can't get a breath, you can't speak, you can't integrate, you can't bring any kind of value other than this functional job that we want you to do, which you didn't get any kind of meaning or purpose from it.
So whatever task they would ask me to do, I couldn't do it fast enough or I couldn't do it well enough. And I remember when I was on folding clothes, they partnered me with someone. So I'm next to someone who's folding their clothes and refolding my clothes. and it just was not going to work. So again, I was there for 3 weeks, and I think that maybe they let me go.
I know you've heard me talk about this before, about the environment being the sort of soil, if you like, of where your feet are planted when you're working, and what kind of nutrients do you need. And you know that you weren't going to survive in that kind of soil. And I wonder if we could use a moment to just reflect on that conversation and play it, trying to do a revised or a fresh design statement to see if anything new comes up for you from what we've been talking about. Are you willing to give that a go and see how we get on?
Yeah, let's go for it. I might need your help.
What about that? So the first bit is super easy because you just get to say your name. So the first part of the design statement is for you to say you are. So I'll say I.
Jeffrey,
Brilliant. You got the first bit right.
will use my skills in helping individuals, teams, and organizations to look below the surface, challenges, and something else I could say is we use my skills in helping individuals, teams, and organizations find their uniqueness.
Let's hold that bit. Then we're going to go to, and my passion for, and again, given your conversation about what gives you the most buzz, if you like, or the love, the energy that you want to be involved in, what comes to mind for you for your sort of top passions, if you like?
And my passion for growth and challenge are two things that come to mind. Growth, challenge, adventure, novelty.
So this is the impact bit. So what you want as a result of your work.
To be empowered to find solutions to their problems.
Okay. And so if we then think about the last part, which is an environment that is, and again, fill the gap of what you need to be in play in order for you to thrive. And you can have a few things in here.
An environment that is curious, open to challenge, willing to take risks, willing to be different, take a stand, works best for me.
Okay. So I'm making notes so I can read it back to you. I will do my best to read this back of what I've captured. So I, Jeffrey, will use my skills in helping individuals, teams, and organizations to look below the surface at their challenges and find their uniqueness. And my passion for growth, challenge, adventure, and novelty to help them and be empowered to find solutions to their problems. An environment that's curious, authentic, open to challenge, willing to take risks, willing to be different, and take a stand works best for me. Don't clap me, clap you. You did it. I just gave you the framework. So kind of like curious straight away is you've done a design statement before, and that doesn't sound exactly like your old one. So what's your reaction to what you've just put together?
I'm very surprised at that design statement. I'm very surprised at how it came out. I was curious to see what had come out, and I'm surprised at how it came out, and I'm happy with it. We always talk about the first messy draft, and I do feel as though I've got something to work with and something to think about. And this will, I can see it really supporting me to position myself as well, position myself in a useful way.
Brilliant. I think there's definitely some things, and you're right, we often talk about that's your first messy draft, and it's hard, but you want to get that messy draft down because from there, you'll tweak it and you'll move bits and you'll find other words that you want to use. If I said to you, out of 10, where would you score yourself of being in that thriving zone at the moment? What kind of figure would you put against that if you had to kind of reflect on that statement and how close you are to living that?
I don't want to take a cop-out answer, but I do think I have to go in the middle at 5, because I'd say potentially, without knowing, this is what I've been doing, and that's why I give the 5. But where I see the vision at a 10 is being very intentional about it and holding it as my position. So it's like, how much am I living this now? I can see that I've been doing it almost without knowing in some way. And I think when I can hold it and position myself in that way, the impacts and the actual results will be quite different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so what's your next move then to get closer, to shift from that? I don't mean unintentionally been doing this, but you've not purposely necessarily been driving it 100% that way. What's the next move for you to get closer to a 10?
I think owning it, the story I shared with you earlier, owning it was all the difference. My career design statement, when I got my career design statement through doing the accreditation and I owned it, things shifted. So owning it, I believe, is always a good first step. And then firstly refining it and then owning it. Because I've been able to do a lot with my career design statement, and I can see that this will be a good way to position the value I can bring to an organization. Right now, the impact is solving problems. And again, I'll do some more work on that, and maybe there'll be a clearer way to get that message across to them.
don't forget, you have been doing this work in organizations.
Yeah.
And so actually maybe reconnecting with some of those to ask, this is what I'm hoping to step more into. Like, what's your feedback for me? Or what's your view on that? Is it needed? What's your organization still hungry for or in need of? And so has the conversation unlocked some new thinking?
Most definitely. I got a lot more from this conversation than I bargained for. So yeah, thank you.
If you were talking to younger Jeffrey, with his football boots on and his Player of the Year or trophy in his hand, and you were going to give him a message about his future world of work, what advice would you give him?
Oh gosh, it would have to be take risks. Because as I say, I was quite risk averse. And as I shared with you earlier, I didn't really process it as I was taking risks. I just processed it as I'm doing something which part of me I want to do, but I feel like an imposter. And I was like, go and do it anyway, because you don't walk alone. I was like, whatever happens, God is with you. So that's what helped me take risk.
Yeah, I love that. Go and do it anyway. You don't walk alone, I think. It's brilliant. Thank you for that. And people may be interested to know more about you, connect with you, dive in and find out a little bit more information. How is it best for people to connect and find you if they're curious to know a bit more?
Definitely. Really simple. 2 ways. My website, jeffreywotherspoon.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Jeffrey Wotherspoon. I usually come up for people as the first. So yeah, LinkedIn and via website. Yeah, most definitely. Thank you, Zoe. I'm really pleased to be a guest and have this conversation with you and deep dive in the way that we have. So I appreciate you inviting me on.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success.
And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosa
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.